Welcome back to Books with Karen. I'm Karen. If you're new here, a warm welcome. Thanks for coming along. And as it says, Books with Karen, this is all about books. If you are not new and you've watched my videos before, thanks so much for coming back. Today's video is a wrap up of the books that I've read recently. So the books that I read in June and most of July. I haven't read as many books as I wanted to get through. I think that's because a couple of the books that I did read, I got a little bit stuck with. So it took us longer than I thought to read them. I think this is a wrap up of my June TBR. And I don't think I did a July TBR, but there will be another one coming soon. So I think I've got 7 books here, so let's just get started. The first one is a book called Hydra by Matt Wesolowski, and this is the second in the series of a series called 6 Stories. I really enjoyed the first one. I've actually borrowed these off my son Simon, and I really enjoyed the first one. So he said, did you want to read the second one? So I thought, yes, I did want to read the second one. And basically it is about, the books are about Scott King. And Scott King is an investigative journalist who runs a podcast. And each book is one series of each podcast. And each series involves him interviewing 6 people that are involved with what are normally unsolved murder cases. So that was what the first book was about. The first book was called 6 Stories. This one's called Hydra. The first book was about an unsolved murder case. This one is about a murder case that has already been solved, and the murderer is already been convicted and is in a mental health institution. So the murderer was a girl or a woman called Orla MacLeod, who murdered a mother, a stepfather and a sister with a hammer. And she was put in a mental health institution because they deemed that she was insane when she murdered them. And Scott wants to look into this murder to see whether she actually was insane. And he interviews Orla herself, and he also interviews 5 people that were witnesses in the case that helped convict Orla. So each witness is interviewed by Scott, and he gets the backstory and what they thought of Orla, and he gets Orla's own story. And I mean, the murder in itself, murdering your family with a hammer, is quite shocking and gruesome and that kind of stuff. But there is some things in here that were quite scary. And one of the main things, something that was kind of running through the book, was the fact that Orla was into playing Korean, they were called Korean death games. So one of them was called the elevator game. And these are actual games that, you know, people out of the book have played. They're on the internet. You can find them. I wouldn't advise you go and play any of them because they are very strange, and they're all about death and the dead and things like that. And I think one of them, the elevator game, was actually turned into a film quite a few years ago. I haven't seen it. It was the first time I've heard of it when I actually looked up to see if any of the games in here were real. But the Korean elevator game was kind of part of Orla's story, and she sees ghosts, or whether they're ghosts or kind of hallucinations. They aren't the kind of thing I would want to see. But there is a lot of scary stuff in here. It was quite fast paced. It was easy to read. It was a definite page turner. And there was a thread running through the story where someone was threatening Scott King. And I didn't really guess who that was until quite near the end of the book. So it did keep us guessing. I definitely want to go on and read the next 4 of the 6 story series. I think they're very well written, and it's quite an interesting idea to kind of base the book as a podcast. It's not actually a podcast, it is a book, but it is a podcast within the book, if you see what I mean. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, anyway, I enjoyed the book. It's quite a short book, and I did give this 4 stars, so I would recommend that. The next book I think everybody's heard of, and it is Anne of Green Gables. This was written by Lucy Maud Montgomery, and I think it was written in the late 1800s. I vaguely recall watching the TV series of this when I was maybe around 10. So that was like 50 years ago. So I had never read the book, and I found this in a charity shop, and I thought, yeah, I've just got to read it. And if you don't know what it's about a little orphan girl called Anne who is adopted by a brother and sister called Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert, who run a farm called Green Gables. And they wanted to adopt a boy, but they got a girl instead by mistake, and Anne won them over, and so they adopted her. I think she's about 11 when she first comes into the story. She's got red hair that she hates, but she sees the beauty in everything but herself. She makes magical stories up about a little wood or a river or a lake. She just sees the beauty in everything, and I think it would be lovely if every child thought like Anne does. Anne Shirley, to give her a full title. And she gets into all sorts of mischief, including accidentally dyeing her hair green because she really does hate the red hair. So she tries to dye her hair and it ends up green. She invites her best friend to tea and accidentally gives her something that gets her drunk. So she's always getting into trouble all the time. And the book, as you go through the chapters, it sees her grow from an 11-year-old awkward girl into quite a beautiful young lady of, I think she's about maybe 17, 18 when the book ends. It is quite a descriptive book, as books would have been at the time that it was written. There's a lot of description in, but I did find it easy to read. And because the chapters are kind of little stories in themselves about Anne's life, you could pick it up and put it down and read something else in between if you wanted to. But I did find that quite easy to read. And it just was quite joyful. It made you smile. I can't see children of today reading this, to be quite honest, unless they're quite literary kind of children. I don't think it would appeal in 2025. No, I don't think it would. There is a follow-up to this called Anne of Avonlea, which follows Anne's life as she's older, and her relationship with Gilbert, who she meets when she's a little girl in school and hates him. I do think they get together. So I would like to read Anne of Avonlea as well. It kind of helped me relive some of my childhood as I read it, because, like I say, I do remember watching the TV series. But it is a lovely book, and if you like that kind of thing, it had a bit of a feel of Little House on the Prairie. If you like that kind of thing, then you will probably really enjoy Anne of Green Gables. I gave this one 4 stars as well. So yeah, just a really lovely read. The next book I actually read on my Kindle, so I'll put a picture in here. And I'm just going to check my notes just so I don't miss anything out. Murder at the Seview Hotel by Glenda Young. Now, the reason I picked this up is because it's set in Scarborough in England, and Scarborough is one of my go-to places, and I've been going there every year since I was 9, and I love the place. So it was nice to read about something, about an area where I'd been. She talked about a lot of the places I'd visited, and she actually mentioned some places that I hadn't visited that I've jotted down for the next time I go to Scarborough. And this was actually the prompt for me to do the video I did recently, which are books that are related to holidays I've had or places I love to visit. If you haven't seen that, I will link it at the end so you can go and have a look. So Murder at the Seview Hotel is a series. This was the first in a series. I think there's about 3 of them, and Glenda Young has written other books as well. And it follows a woman called Helen Dexter, who, when this book starts, her husband Tom has just died. I think they're in their late 40s, if I remember rightly. And her husband's died and she's left on her own, and they've ran the Seview hotel for quite a few years, and she doesn't know whether she wants to carry on running it. She has a couple of people that help her in the hotel, Jean and Sally, who cook and clean, but she doesn't know. It's only been like 3 months since her husband died, and she's kind of still grieving and trying to get back to some kind of normal life. So as this is going on, she gets a phone call from a guy who says, can they come and stay in the hotel, because they're going to be doing a show in Scarborough. And the group is called Twelvis. So it is a group of 12 Elvises who want to book the hotel. So she decides that she will do that because she thinks it'll take her mind off what's happening in her life. And she thinks it's a good idea. So Twelvis check into the Seview hotel. And you get to know the characters, you get to know some of the Elvises, you get to know Helen's character quite well, you get to know more about Jean and Sally and some of Helen's friends. Helen also has a dog, and it was really nice to get to know the characters. You got to know more about them as the book went on. But what happens is the Twelvis group check in, and one of them ends up dead. One of them is murdered. Hence murder at the Seview hotel. It's billed as a cosy crime novel, so it's not like a gritty murder book. It is a cosy crime novel, so think more Miss Marple than something like Tanner French or Holland Coburn, something like that. It is a cosy crime novel, even though murder is not a cosy thing. There's a couple of different plot lines in there. There's somebody trying to buy the hotel and they won't tell her who it is, and a couple of little twists and turns throughout the book. It was quite predictable. You could guess what was going to happen, but it was an enjoyable read. And the next 2 books that Glenda Young has written also follow Helen Dexter, so I would definitely read those. I gave this a 3.5 stars. It wasn't fabulous, but it was very easy to read, and I could imagine a nice cosy night during the winter, just curled up on the settee with this book. It was fun, it was sad, just a nice book. 3.5 stars. So the next book I read was a book that was sent to me by the author. He has published this himself. So it's a self-published book, and it was called The Lich Before the Darkness. And I have reviewed this on a separate video, which again I will link at the end if you want to go and have a watch of that. So I'll just give you a quick overview of what this book was about and what I thought of it. It's by a guy called Timothy Stormcrow. And it is kind of a modern day story, a modern day take on monsters and vampires and werewolves and witches and all that kind of thing. So it is a modern take on it. You know, they get on buses and all that sort of thing. And it follows 3 characters, Ashleen, Eric and Maeve, who all in some way investigate the paranormal and supernatural. I really enjoyed this story. The story was quick, it was fast paced. Again, it's fairly easy to read, but this does need editing. It most definitely needs editing. In some places, the sentences weren't quite structured right. And I maybe there would be a paragraph where I thought I don't quite understand that and had to go back a little bit. So it definitely needs editing. But Timothy, the author, I did actually speak to him via email, and he said he couldn't afford an editor. So he was just doing it on his own. There is going to be 3 of these in the series, and he's halfway through the second one at the moment. So hopefully his editing may get a little better. It is such a shame that new authors, maybe can't afford that, because it does need it. But the story itself is really interesting. It kept me attention, it kept me turning the pages, and I read this quite quickly. I won't go into what the story's about other than to say it is investigating the paranormal and there is a catalyst and all that kind of thing. The video that I did on it will tell you more. But there are chapters interspersed with the chapters about Aileen, Ashley and Erica Maeve that are called Elsewhere chapters. And they're basically little chapters, maybe it's just 3 or 4 pages, about the other kind of monsters and supernatural beings that are in the world. So you've got something on the bogeyman and exorcism and something called a myling. So there is little chapters interspersed that were really interesting. They kind of added to the book. So while the story of Ashley and Maeve and Eric are going on, these other monsters and supernatural beings are at work throughout the modern world. Some of them are a little bit scary, but I am looking forward to reading the second one of these. I did feel the characters need to be developed a little bit more, and Timothy does assure me that the second book is bigger and he has more scope to develop the characters. So I will definitely look forward to that. Because of the editing, I've only given this a 3.5 stars. The story, I would definitely give a 4-star, but like I say, it could do with editing, but I still recommend that you read it. Maybe get in early on an author that is going to be big. The next book I read was for the Once Upon a Book Club that I run. If you don't know what that is, we choose a book once a month, we read it, and then I do a live YouTube video at the end of the month or the beginning of next month, where I invite people live onto the stream and they can chat and tell us what they thought about the book, or you can just join me in the chat to chat about it as well. So you could be live on camera or you could be in the chat. I don't mind which. June's book was Her Fearful Symmetry by Audrey Niffenegger. Now, I hadn't read anything by this author before. I know she wrote The Time Traveller's Wife, but I'd never read it and I haven't seen it. I think it is a film. And this book, I actually got this out of the library and it was a large print book. So it made it so easy for me to read. Now, this was a strange book. It starts where a woman called Elspeth is dying and she is in a hospital bed and she's with her younger lover, Robert. And then Elspeth dies. And Elspeth has a twin called Edie, so this is set in England, and Elspeth's twin Edie is in America, and they haven't spoken for about 20 years or something. And when Elspeth dies, she lives in a flat overlooking Highgate Cemetery in London, and she leaves the flat to a twin's daughters who are also twins. Sorry if that was a little confusing. So there would be Elspeth's nieces, and they are Julia and Valentina, who are twins. And Elspeth leaves them the flat, but she says Edie and her husband Jack aren't allowed to enter the flat at all, just the twins. So you've got a little bit of a mystery there. You know, why doesn't she want them to come to the flat? Why didn't she speak to Edie for 20 years? So you've got all that mystery going on. This is basically a ghost story. And I don't think that's a spoiler because it does say on the blurb, an aunt who, can't seem to quite leave her flat. So you do know it's a ghost story. It is a ghost story like nothing I've ever read before. It was a very strange book to read. In the building that Elspeth has lived in, so the flat that Julia and Valentina come to, you've got Robert, who is Elspeth's younger lover. He lives on the ground floor. So the Julia and Valentina are living on the middle floor, and there is a couple called Morton and Marika who live on the top floor. Now, Morton has really bad, I think it's OCD. He can't leave the house, and Marika is his wife. So you've got a few things going on here. And I would say the theme of this book is people feeling trapped in different ways. And it kind of develops as you read the book, and you understand what that means. I didn't actually pick up on that. I did read the thing about feeling trapped on a Goodreads review, and I thought, yeah, that is what this book is about. It's about people feeling trapped in their lives. I liked the story, the stories they had about Highgate Cemetery. I thought they were really interesting, and it's actually somewhere I would like to visit. But it is a very strange book. There are parts of this book where you just think, what is going on here? And I wouldn't say it was fast paced, but it kept us reading it because I didn't really know what was going on until maybe halfway through it. The ghost part of the story is very strange. But I would say I would give this a 4 stars. Once I'd got to the end of it, we'll say 3.75 stars, we'll see. I got to the end of it and someone said to us, did you enjoy it? And I said, I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not sure what it was about and I'm not sure if I enjoyed it. But after I'd had a few days to think about it, and once I did the live stream where we discussed it, I think I did enjoy it. It was different. It was definitely a very different book. And I maybe would read another of Audrey Niffenegger's books. But yeah, 3.75 stars for that. Let me know if you've read it in the comments below and what you thought. And if you want to go across and watch the live stream, again, I will leave the link at the end of this video. So this next book, The Dravnik Book Club by Eva Glynn, I had high hopes for this. And this was one of the books that I got stuck in, and it took us a while to read it. And I did even consider not reading it. I considered DNFing it, so did not finish, but I did. I persevered and I read it. I probably put it down for about a week and thought, but I did read it. Now, this book is set in Dravnik, which I loved because I've been to Dravnik, and she does describe a lot of the places in there. It's set in Dravnik city, in the old city, within the walls. And I could picture all of the places that she mentioned. She even talks about the stray cats that are living within the railings, the grounds of one of the churches there. And we'd seen those. I took pictures of them. So yeah, I liked the fact that it was set in a place that I could picture, which was another of the books that I put on that video about books set in places that I enjoyed or I'd been on holiday to. So this book follows Claire, Luna and Carmela and Vedran, who is Claire's cousin. Claire comes to Dravnik because she has had long COVID and she is recovering, and she is asked by her grandmother, who lives in Dravnik, if she would like to run a bookshop that was there, because the guy who owned it, his wife was ill and he wasn't able to be there. So she goes to Dravnik to run this bookshop, and they start up a book club. Luna is the shop assistant in the book club, and Carmela is one of the women who come to the book club. Now, they all have their own secrets. They all have stories to tell, which you find out more about during the book. But it starts where Vedran, who is Claire's cousin, his girlfriend apparently drowned the year before, but her body was never found. So there is a bit of a mystery surrounding that. Vedran was suspected of, killing her. And one of the first books the first book they read for their book club is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Usman. So they decide that they will investigate the disappearance or the drowning of Dee Dee, who was Vedran's girlfriend, and find out what happened. That story continues throughout the book, but it is it's a little bit, I don't think it's very well developed. I felt like that could have been a book on its own, and I think I found that throughout the book. Luna had, a backstory. Carmela has a backstory. There's other people in the book have backstories. It's got lots of different sort of storylines within it. You've got war stories, from Croatia being at war. You have got stories of dementia. You've got stories of people struggling to come out. You've got stories about domestic violence. So I just felt like there was lots of different stories going on, and I don't think any of them, for me, were told fully enough. I think this could have been 3 books in itself. And I didn't realise until the end of the book that Vedran was actually a character in a previous book that Eva Glynn had written called The Collaborator's Daughter. So maybe there would have been more of his story in that, and I needed to read that before I read this, because I did feel like I was missing something with Vedran. But yeah, it was, it was predictable. Everything was tied up neatly at the end. I don't know if I would say I enjoyed it. Like I say, I struggled in the middle of it. There was another thing that kind of jarred with us when I was reading it. There are a few places, particularly in the first half of the book, where a couple of the characters swear. Now, it's not, I'm by no means a prude, I swear myself, and they weren't bad swear words, but it felt like the swear words were just shoved in for effect that didn't really work. Every time I read one of the swear words, it was in dialogue, and it just kind of jarred with this. I didn't feel it fitted. I didn't think it was necessary. So yeah, I don't think I would read another one of these, and I think I would give this 2.5 stars. Other people may like it. It's a nice, easy enough read. But yeah, there was too much going on and just not enough of each of the storylines. And the last book I read, which I just actually finished yesterday, is called London Rain by Nicola Upson. And this is another book that I didn't know because I didn't read the last paragraph on the blurb properly. But it does say that this is the 6th novel in the Josephine Tey series. Now, I would have probably still picked it up, even if I'd read that, because sometimes you can read a series and you don't have to have read the previous books. I don't feel like this was the case with this one. So it starts where Josephine she writes plays, and it's set in 1937, and it's set in the week of the George VI's coronation. And it is set around the BBC. Josephine, her play is being recorded as a radio production to go out the day before the coronation. And she goes into the BBC and she meets Vivian Beresford, who works for the Radio Times there. And Vivian's husband is Anthony Beresford, who is the BBC's top radio broadcaster, who is going to be covering part of the coronation. And you meet a few other characters, people who are in the radio production of Josephine's play. You meet Josephine's best friend, who is Archie Penrose, who is a detective and who has obviously also been in the other books with Josephine. Josephine has a girlfriend called Marta, and the bit with Josephine and Marta, which you hear about their relationship and also Archie's relationship with his girlfriend, that was where I thought I'm missing something here, because it felt like a half-told storyline with their relationships, which didn't really have anything to do with the crime. This is historical crime fiction, by the way. Somebody gets murdered. It didn't really have anything to do with that, but I did feel like I was missing something, and I feel I would have known what was happening had I read the previous books. But anyway, somebody gets murdered on the day of the coronation. It says on the blurb that it is the BBC's best known broadcaster. So Anthony Beresford is murdered. And it took a while to get to that part. I enjoyed from there, from the murder, the investigation of the murder, you know, the interaction with all of the suspects and the murderer themselves, I enjoyed all that bit. I didn't enjoy the bits where it talked about Josephine's relationship, Josephine and Morton, because I didn't know the background and I felt I needed to. There was also quite a lot of description about the coronation, which I didn't feel was necessary either. And it kind of made the first part of the book a little bit slow. It was predictable. Again, I didn't totally guess the ending, but most of it I did. So it was predictable, and I felt the ending, there was something missing. I felt like it needed to go on a little bit. So whether there is going to be a 7th novel that carries that story on, I'm not sure. I mean, it does kind of tie the story up, but I wanted to know what happened next. So I think I would only give this book 3 stars. It is set in London, and I quite enjoyed again, she mentions things in London that I could relate to. I quite like the fact that it was set in 1937. I'm not sure if I would go back and read the other novels that Nicola Upson has written. It wasn't that good for me to want to do that. Again, if you like a mystery crime fiction book, then I wouldn't say it was quite a cosy crime, but again, it's not a gritty murder. Although it could be in places. There was about 4 or 5 murders in here. 2 of them were relevant and the others weren't, and I wasn't really sure why they were in there, but that's just me. So if you have read that, or if you've read the previous novels that involve Josephine Tey, let me know what you thought. Let me know if you think I should read them or not. So yeah, 3 stars for that one, unfortunately. Well, unfortunately, I'm saying unfortunately, 3 stars isn't bad. It's just not fantastic. So those were the 7 books I've read so far. Let me know if you've read anything good in the last few weeks. Maybe it's something that I would like to read as well. Let me know in the comments below. So I hope you found that interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.